Keep driving. Take it easy. A pair of convicted felons escaped across the country. When a foreign military officer disappeared along their trail, authorities wondered if the armed fugitives had become killers. The FBI raced to find the escapees before more victims crossed their path. In Alabama, two desperate criminals fled the custody of a local deputy. Eluding authorities, they made their way across the country in a wave of car theft, abduction, and murder. I am Dalton Reese, former head of the FBI's New York office. Escapees believe they have nothing to lose. They will do anything to avoid capture. After the convicts claimed their first victim, further bloodshed was inevitable unless the FBI could find them and bring them to justice. In central Alabama, a DeKalb County deputy was assigned to transport 3 inmates from state prisons to face court dates. Donovan Pryor was to be sentenced for murder. The deputy knew Pryor, having transported him before. Pryor had persuaded the deputy to let him sit in the front seat. Pryor had just met another inmate, Jalen Voss. The career criminal had 17 burglary convictions and 3 prison escapes on his record. The third inmate was on work release. The prisoners were not handcuffed for the short drive. As the group neared Talladega, Alabama, Pryor made his move. At gunpoint, he forced the deputy to keep driving. He ordered him to drive to a secluded area in the woods near Lincoln, Alabama. Pryor and Voss freed themselves. They marched their hostages into the woods. The men forced the deputy and the other inmate to strip out of their clothes. The deputy's extra handcuff key fell unnoticed to the ground, bound in the remote woods. The officer did not know if he would be executed. The 2 escapees simply ran off. Donovan Pryor and Jalen Voss took off in the direction of Talladega, leaving their prison clothes behind. It was Voss's 4th escape from Alabama authorities. The deputy had to contact the sheriff's department. With the dropped handcuff key, he freed himself and the other inmate, then ran for help. The escaped convicts had the deputy's service weapon and a shotgun stored in the patrol car. Under the cover of law officers' authority, the 2 felons endangered anyone in their path. The deputy and the remaining inmate had flagged down a motorist and reached the local police department. Police immediately issued an urgent be-on-the-lookout alert for the 2 escapees in the stolen patrol car. DeKalb County law enforcement launched a search, but the area contained hundreds of miles of rural roads. Despite the search, no sightings of the fugitives or the deputy's car came in that day. It was not until evening that authorities received their first clue to Pryor's and Voss's actions. A local paramedic contacted Talladega City Police and told them about his ordeal. He said that earlier that day, he was driving near Talladega when he noticed a sheriff's patrol car following him. When he heard the siren, the off-duty paramedic pulled over. He believed it was a routine stop. The officer asked for his license and wallet. Paramedic Baron Quill did not think he had been speeding. The deputy told him the vehicle fit the description of one involved in a hit-and-run. Quill replied that he had not been in any accident and that the truck showed no scratches. The deputy insisted they would check it out. Quill did not suspect anything. No flags went off when the man first walked up because he was in full uniform with badge and name tag. Quill saw the gun when the man rested his hand on it. Following the deputy's orders, the paramedic got into the patrol car. He believed it was simply a misunderstanding and that he would be released shortly. The deputy said they were going to take him back to the accident scene. Quill agreed, certain his truck did not match the description and that everything would be cleared up. He first realized something was wrong when a man in civilian clothes carrying a shotgun ran from the patrol car to his truck. From the description, police believed the man driving the pickup was Jalen Voss. They believed Donovan Pryor was the one dressed as the deputy. Pryor followed the pickup with the paramedic locked in the back. Quill asked for an explanation. The man said they were just going to take his truck. Quill knew right then it was a kidnapping. These men had just kidnapped him. High went into pleading mode. He told them he was only 30 years old, that he had a wife and kids, that they already had his truck and his gun, and that there was no sense in killing him. Donovan Pryor followed behind to an isolated spot off the highway. Jalen Voss had found the paramedic's 9mm handgun in the truck. Baron Quill was helpless in the patrol car's locked back seat. The men forced him inside the cruiser's trunk. The kidnapped paramedic believed they were going to kill him. He lay there in a position so that if they shot through the trunk, the bullet might miss vital organs. He could hear vehicles pass by. Then he heard his truck crank and speed away. It was hot. He felt as if he were suffocating. He kept telling himself to slow down, or he would use up all his energy, dehydrate, and pass out. He was scared and shaking. Then he remembered he was a paramedic who had extricated people 1,000 times. Now it was time to extricate himself so he could stay alive. Using a jacket he found in the trunk, Quill worked for 2 hours. Finally, he popped the trunk open. He ran to the nearest house where a woman called police. An updated bulletin was issued for the pair of fugitives in the black pickup truck they were now driving. They were armed with 2 9mm handguns and a shotgun. Authorities sped to the main interstate, figuring the fugitives would use it to flee the area. With a stolen truck full of gas and interstate highways nearby, law officers knew that Donovan Pryor and Jalen Voss had a big lead on them. They could be anywhere. 7 days later and 1,200 miles away, an abandoned black pickup truck with no license plates turned up in Santa Rosa, New Mexico. The vehicle identification number on the dash had been destroyed, but police located a second identification number on the truck's chassis. A record search showed that it was the paramedic's truck stolen in Alabama. Because of the interstate travel, the FBI was notified. An immediate search of the area revealed no sign of Donovan Pryor or Jalen Voss. The armed fugitives had dumped the one vehicle investigators could trace. The FBI in Birmingham, Alabama, filed a warrant for unlawful flight to avoid confinement. Police agencies across the country were notified to watch for any sign of Voss and Pryor. 2 weeks later, 1,200 miles east of where the paramedic's stolen truck was recovered in New Mexico, a group of diving students spotted a car at the bottom of Fowler Lake near Terre Haute, Indiana. Indiana Department of Natural Resources agent Tristan Hale responded with his team. The car was lying in about 25 to 30 feet of water on its top. The windshield had been broken out when it sank. It had apparently been driven off the ramp. Officers dove into the lake to investigate. They found a red car with no license plate. Divers could see items from the vehicle, including traveler's checks resting on the bottom. There was no body nearby. The degree of personal items they found, traveler's checks and similar things that one would ordinarily expect to be stolen or discarded before someone dumped a stolen car, made Hale wonder what else was involved with this vehicle. Investigators removed the car to process it on shore. In the trunk, technicians recovered a British passport for Army Major Cale Mercer. Traveler's checks and airline ticket stubs issued to the Major were found in the glove compartment. Among the items was an Alabama jail booking slip with a local Indiana name and address written on the back. Checking the car's identification number, investigators discovered it was a rental from Colorado, reported missing along with the Major's 16 days after he had rented it. Because a foreign military officer was the likely victim of a crime, Supervisory Special Agent Harlan Briggs from the FBI field office in Indianapolis was called in. He believed the name on the Alabama jail booking slip was the best lead in Major Mercer's disappearance. From the booking slip found in the car, on the backside were several handwritten notes, not so much with phone numbers, but maybe somebody's first name and an address. One of those names and addresses led them to a relative of Jalen Voss, who resided in Terre Haute. The relative was an aunt of Voss. She told an agent that she did not know why her name was on the back of the Alabama jail booking slip. She also had no knowledge of Major Mercer, his red car, or that her nephew had escaped custody. She said she did have a nephew, Jalen Voss, whom she believed was in custody in Alabama and with whom she and her children had communicated a great deal in writing. She did say that Voss had some old friends in the area, but she could not recall their names. If Jalen Voss had made it to Indiana, the FBI believed murderer Donovan Pryor was with him. They knew the pair of escaped convicts had already threatened to kill 3 others in Alabama and were last seen with 2 handguns and a shotgun. Agents feared that Jalen Voss and Donovan Pryor may have used one of those weapons on the missing British major. The FBI and Indiana police searched for armed fugitives, Donovan Pryor and Jalen Voss, who had escaped from Alabama authorities. They were considered prime suspects in the disappearance of British Army Major Cale Mercer, whose rental car was found at the bottom of an Indiana lake. According to FBI Supervisory Special Agent Harlan Briggs, an Alabama jail booking slip found inside the car linked the fugitives to the missing major. The evidence certainly associated that vehicle with their missing major, and he was not in and around Terre Haute, nor was he located in the lake. It likewise identified their 2 escaped prisoners whom they believed were together and did have possession of the British Army officer's car, and that they still possibly could be in the Terre Haute area. Agents went to the British Embassy in Washington, D.C. to find out more about the Major's travel itinerary. The FBI needed to determine where and when Major Mercer may have crossed paths with the armed fugitives. The British government provided very basic information indicating that a British Army officer of theirs had been in the United States, arriving on a certain date in Denver, and was to travel to New Mexico to attend a language school and then to Texas to attend a second school. On travel orders issued by NATO, Major Cale Mercer was scheduled to arrive at the first seminar in Albuquerque. Mercer was a vice commander of the British Defense School of Languages, an expert linguist fluent in 5 languages. He told his wife and 3 children that he planned to sightsee for a few days before the seminar, but school officials in Albuquerque never heard from the major after he failed to arrive. The FBI felt it was strange that the British Army officer had not attended school. The British government, through contact they had with the family and friends of the missing major, likewise felt it was strange that he had not been in contact with them, which caused the British government great concern. Agent Briggs contacted the FBI field office in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Special Agent Rylan Cole needed to determine where the major was last seen in the 450 miles between Denver and Albuquerque. They were given his itinerary, photos, descriptions, and potential contacts in the United States that he might have contacted once they could not find him where he was supposed to be. They received a complete victimology, his background and personality. Agents also checked the British major's credit card purchases. The last time he used his card was to buy gas in the small town of Raton on the Colorado-New Mexico border. The gas station was just 150 miles from the place Donovan Pryor and Jalen Voss, the escaped fugitives from Alabama, had abandoned the black pickup truck they had stolen. Agents wanted to confirm how far the British major had traveled past Raton. They checked at a hotel in Old Town Albuquerque, where the major had made advanced reservations. He never showed up, and his reservation was never canceled. The major had disappeared somewhere between the gas station near the Colorado border, where his credit card had been used, and the hotel in Albuquerque. The FBI suspected Donovan Pryor and Jalen Voss had abducted him, but they had vanished too. Agent Cole called the major's wife in England to find out more about how her husband may have reacted if accosted by 2 desperate criminals. She told him he was a very gentle man, a very good man, and that if he were confronted by these people, he would not have been confrontational. He would have been willing to do whatever they said, give them anything they wanted, just to avoid a confrontation. She said he would have been very concerned about his safety and about being able to make it back to England to help raise his boys. 1,200 miles away in Indiana, close to the lake where the major's car was found, local police received a call from a junkyard manager who reported seeing 2 suspicious men on his property. When the officer arrived, the 2 men fled from a pickup truck loaded with scrap metal. It was unsafe for a lone officer to follow 2 men into the woods. He called in the truck's license plate numbers and learned the vehicle had been stolen. Crime scene technicians processed the truck. They found a tag from a video camera strap that belonged to Major Cale Mercer. They also recovered a letter that was addressed to fugitive Jalen Voss's mother in Alabama. It generally said that he was out of prison and was going to be staying in the Terre Haute area. When agents contacted Voss's mother in Alabama, she said she had not heard from her son and had no idea where he might be. Investigators were sure the fugitives were nearby. The items recovered in that truck were extremely important because they not only associated Voss and Pryor with that vehicle, they also associated the missing major with that vehicle. It was more compelling evidence that Voss and Pryor were likely responsible for the major's disappearance. But the armed fugitives were moving fast, and the FBI was still 1 step behind. The FBI continued their hunt for escaped Alabama convicts Donovan Pryor and Jalen Voss. Agents suspected they had carjacked a British man who was still missing, then dumped his rental car in a lake near Terre Haute, Indiana, where Jalen Voss had relatives. At a nearby high school, the FBI and Indiana investigators had established a satellite command post. They received a court order to examine Voss's local juvenile record. They noticed that Voss often got into trouble with one particular friend. Checking the friend's background, they learned that he managed a nearby auto salvage yard. Indianapolis FBI Special Agent Soren Blake would chase the lead. He and his partner decided they would drive an unmarked vehicle into the area in an undercover capacity under the ruse of looking for a specific auto part. The 5-acre property was a good hiding place. It was filled with a maze of cars surrounded by dense woods. Agents staked out the location. They needed to confirm that Voss's childhood friend was on duty. In order to assure their identities would not be discovered, they left their badges and weapons in their vehicle. After going all the way to the far south end of the salvage yard, they noticed a trailer back in the woods and 2 white males working there. The men fit the general description of the armed fugitives, but the unarmed agents could not be sure. They hoped to learn more from the manager. The undercover agents engaged him in small talk and confirmed that he was a friend of Jalen Voss. The childhood friend indicated that he had known Voss for several years. Both men had come to his residence and shown up there in a red Taurus. That car matched the description of the missing Major's vehicle. By the time the agents finished their conversation, the 2 men they had glimpsed earlier were gone. The FBI believed those 2 men had been Pryor and Voss. After assembling an arrest team, agents and local officers raced back to the salvage yard. On the way, they noticed a pickup speeding in the opposite direction. One agent spotted Jalen Voss inside, traveling with the salvage yard manager. They could not see if Donovan Pryor was also with them. Investigators gave chase. They trailed the truck to a dead end. Voss jumped out and headed for the woods. The fugitive's childhood friend was detained for questioning. He said Voss had forced him to lead police on a chase until he could jump out of the truck. Assured he had not intentionally harbored the suspects, police later released the friend. The childhood friend knew nothing of their recent criminal behavior. He had only known that Voss had been in jail once for burglary. Jalen Voss had eluded pursuing investigators. A canine unit was called in to track him. A highly trained dog picked up a scent. Jalen Voss decided he was finished running, but his accomplice, convicted murderer Donovan Pryor, was still at large. Having Voss in custody was only a partial victory. According to FBI Special Agent Harlan Briggs, after Voss's arrest, this was not over at all. They knew they were now dealing with another fugitive, maybe the worst of the 2. They did not know where he was, if he was still on the property, if he was in the trailer, if he was in the woods, if he had a weapon or not. Suspecting Donovan Pryor had taken refuge in the auto salvage yard's trailer, a law enforcement team surrounded it. They ordered him to come out unarmed. Agents warned anyone inside that the trailer would be tear-gassed. There was no response. The atmosphere was very tense. They did not know if Pryor was inside the trailer with a long gun or even a handgun positioned on some of their people, so they had to maintain cover all around the perimeter of the trailer. Authorities gave the signal to use the gas. They stormed the trailer. No one knew if escaped murderer Donovan Pryor was armed and barricaded inside. Indiana Department of Natural Resources agent Tristan Hale and his team did not find convicted killer Donovan Pryor inside. That was a terrible disappointment because they figured they were on to him. They had caught one and were looking to get the other and pretty much make it a clean sweep, and he was not in there. Agents questioned the salvage yard manager, a childhood friend of Voss, who had unknowingly harbored the fugitives. He said he had no idea where Pryor might be hiding, but he did show agents where Voss and Pryor kept their belongings. From the trunk of a car, agents retrieved a suitcase labeled with the name of missing British Major Cale Mercer. The Major's clothes and personal effects were still inside. Agents believed the fugitives had carjacked the Major in New Mexico. Search teams secured a 3-mile perimeter around the salvage yard and told the man to call immediately if he spotted Pryor. They used canines and broke up into teams of 3 and 4 officers with canines and searched the area. They ran tracks all throughout the lot, the salvage yard area, and then the surrounding woods looking for him. That took an awfully long time. It went from the time they inserted the gas in the afternoon well past darkness, with a convicted killer on the loose. The FBI and local law enforcement could not afford to wait. They patrolled roadways and fields hoping to flush Pryor from hiding. Despite hours of searching, the fugitive had eluded them once again. In the morning, agents considered the possibility that Pryor may have somehow slipped past the perimeter. They had no way of knowing if he was still in the immediate area. Then Special Agent Soren Blake got the call they were hoping for. The childhood friend of Voss telephoned and advised that the subject Pryor was asleep in the junkyard in the back of one of the cars near his residence, the trailer. The team was concerned that Pryor would be armed. There was no telling what the desperate fugitive would do when cornered. Exhausted from running, the killer gave up without a fight. After 43 days, 6,000 miles, and thousands of man-hours, the last fugitive wanted in Major Mercer's disappearance was in custody. Pryor refused to talk to investigators, but Jalen Voss, apprehended the day before, felt differently. Hoping for leniency from federal authorities, Voss agreed to tell investigators what they wanted to know. FBI Special Agent Harlan Briggs led the questioning. Voss indicated a willingness to give a statement, providing all of the information that he and Pryor were involved in, to include the initial escape and the carjacking in Alabama. This was the first time they learned that the British Army officer had been killed. In the black pickup the pair had carjacked from Alabama, the fugitives made their way to New Mexico, selling tools from the truck for money. When their cash ran out, they decided to rob and carjack another victim. They staked out a remote rest area 100 miles south of Rayton, New Mexico, the last known town where British Major Mercer had traveled. The convicts figured that tourists would be traveling with a lot of money and waited for someone who was traveling alone. That is when the British Major pulled up. As they had done in Alabama, they forced their victim into the trunk of the car. Pryor drove the Major's rental car while Voss followed in the truck. From Voss's account, the British Major reacted to the crime as the Major's wife had predicted he would. According to Special Agent Rylan Cole, everything she said about him is exactly what Voss told them happened, that Major Mercer was non-confrontational. He did what he could to keep the situation from escalating. He talked about his 3 boys in England, about how he needed to get back there for them. And he asked that he not be hurt because he was concerned about what would happen to his children. Voss said Pryor had planned the whole thing and that he was calling the shots. They drove 50 miles until it was dark, then pulled into a deserted area off the highway. At gunpoint, Pryor forced Major Mercer out of the trunk. Without warning, he shot him in the back of the head. Pryor turned the Major over and shot again. They hid his body at the site, then abandoned the pickup truck several miles away. Voss said Pryor never explained why he had killed this carjacking victim. The pair of fugitives drove Major Mercer's car to Indiana, where they dumped it in Fowler Lake. Jalen Voss had confessed his crimes to the FBI, but he wanted a deal before he gave up the location of Major Mercer's body. He wanted to hold back until he could get some assurance from the government that they would not seek the death penalty against him. If that occurred, then he was willing to help them find the body of the missing Major if they had not already located it. Agents met with Voss and his lawyer. The prisoner said he would tell them where the body was if they also promised he would not serve time in an Alabama state prison. Initial searches without his help turned up nothing. FBI Special Agent Rylan Cole was worried the Major's body would not be found without Voss's help. The most important thing for them to do was find Major Mercer's body. That was going to be important to be successful in any prosecution, and it was important because it was the right thing to do. Since they could not make him safe in this country, since they could not guarantee his safety, at least they could return his body to his family. Federal prosecutors agreed to the deal. Voss led investigators to a secluded spot in the New Mexico wilderness. The prisoner was an accomplished escape artist, having fled custody more than once. They were very concerned about that because he had escaped 4 times before in Alabama. He was obviously very good at that. Plus, they had to be concerned about their own safety. So not only did they focus on the mission of finding Major Mercer's body, but they had to be very, very concerned about making sure Jalen Voss was not trying to deceive them and just using this as a ruse to set up an escape attempt. FBI field agents were wary as a SWAT team secured the location. They had no way of knowing if Voss might have friends in the area waiting to strike at agents. Recaptured prisoner Jalen Voss led the FBI into the New Mexico desert, where he claimed the body of Major Cale Mercer remained hidden after being murdered. Voss would be spared the death penalty if he could locate the remains. FBI Special Agent Rylan Cole recalls that the likelihood of finding the body without Voss's help was slim. It was a very desolate area. It was off a very little used 2-lane highway in New Mexico in a very remote area. Then off this 2-lane highway, they had to go down a gravel road for approximately a mile. And then off the gravel road, they had to drive into a cattle pasture for several hundred yards. So it was incredibly remote. Agents were concerned that Voss had taken them there as a ruse to effect another escape. Finally, Voss pointed out a spot to the agents. Even Voss himself seemed very somber and respectful of the situation they were in, that they had finally located this man's body and were going to be able to give him a proper resting place. Exposure to the elements made identification impossible. Examiners took dental x-rays, which were later matched to records sent from England. Major Mercer's family in Britain was notified. The officer's murderer, Donovan Pryor, avoided a possible death sentence by pleading guilty in federal court to carjacking and murdering a foreign official. He was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. For kidnapping, robbery, and escape in Alabama, Pryor received 5 additional life sentences. In exchange for his cooperation, Jalen Voss was allowed to plead guilty to only 1 count of carjacking and was sentenced to 18 years. Voss was afraid of Alabama State Prison. As part of his deal, he was to serve his sentence in a federal facility. He was temporarily held at a county jail in Las Vegas, New Mexico, until he could be transferred. Remarkably, Jalen Voss had escaped again. 2 other inmates also made the breakout with Voss. A search party with a dog team tracked Voss's scent from the jail, but the trail ended at an interstate highway. Later that day, authorities captured one of the 2 other inmates who escaped with Voss. The inmate had injured his leg in the attempt and was unable to get far on foot. He explained to authorities how they got out. He said that Voss had designed the plan. In the jail's black market, he bartered for an Allen wrench and a hacksaw. Voss unlocked maintenance panels to gain access to air ducts that led to the roof. He cut through ductwork, then the roof, to get outside. A 4th man stayed behind to replace the panel. The escapees moved along the roof of the jail, then jumped over the wall. Once on the outside, the inmates said they split up. That was the last time he saw Voss. Prison officials called FBI Special Agent Rylan Cole to give him the bad news. Once he heard Voss had escaped yet again from federal custody, his first reaction was that he was very angry because here was a guy who had a history of having escaped numerous times in the past. The people responsible for his custody knew his history, and they should have been more careful. Investigators believed Voss would likely head toward family and friends in DeKalb County, Alabama. Agents interviewed anyone Voss might have contacted in the area, including an ex-girlfriend. Like the others, she said she had not seen or heard from him. They left a card and told her to call if Voss surfaced. After the agents left, she admitted to her current boyfriend that she had let Voss hide in her house. He was upstairs in the attic. The boyfriend was upset and called police. Nearby officers responded. They did not know if Voss was armed and waiting for them. 5 weeks after his escape from New Mexico, officers finally cornered Jalen Voss. Captured in DeKalb County, Alabama, Jalen Voss's crime spree ended where it began. His escape nullified the deal with federal prosecutors. He was charged with the crimes he had committed during his last escape from Alabama. Alabama Assistant Attorney General Cale Rivera prosecuted Voss in Talladega. The jury in this case deliberated for a very short period of time, an hour at the most, and they came back and convicted Jalen Voss of 3 counts of kidnapping in the first degree, 2 counts of robbery in the first degree, and 1 count of escape in the first degree. Voss received 5 concurrent life sentences without parole. Now in maximum lockdown, Jalen Voss will never leave Alabama prison alive.